Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of the Churchill Club, Karen Tucker.
Thank you very much. Good evening to you and welcome. I am Karen Tucker, CEO at the Churchill Club, and we in this room tonight are in for a major treat. We are about to meet and hear Ursula Burns, Chairman and CEO of Xerox, and George Colony, Chairman and CEO at Forrester Research. They will have a candid conversation about innovation, the economy, leadership, how they're viewing the market, and whatever they would like to talk about, quite frankly. Before we invite our distinguished speakers to the stage, I want to acknowledge our generous program sponsor, Deloitte. Deloitte is a longtime industry leader, among other things, in advancing women and as an employer of choice. Deloitte has also been an active partner of the Churchill Club and our mission to support innovation and economic growth since 1986, the year after we were founded. So we very much appreciate their support. Please join me in thanking Deloitte. And thank you also to Carol Levinson and Carl Langsenkamp of Xerox, who were very instrumental in putting this event together. Let me briefly tell you what's next at the Churchill Club. On July 13, we present the 4th Annual Women Tech Exec Roundtable with speakers from Microsoft, Juniper Networks, SAP, Facebook, and moderated by a woman from Andreessen Horowitz. And on July 18, we present A Talent for Talent with speakers Jeff Weiner, CEO of LinkedIn, in his first U.S. public appearance since the IPO, in conversation with Ari Emanuel, co-CEO of the William Morris Endeavor Entertainment Agency. Kara Swisher of All Things D will moderate. A complete list of programs can always be found on our website at churchillclub.org. And I'll also ask you to save the date if you can for our first annual Churchill Club Awards on September 15. Our awards honor innovation, social benefit, collaboration, and mentorship, which are all very important ingredients in the unique innovation ecosystem here in Silicon Valley or anywhere. And my final announcement, well, I guess I have two. You'll find Twitter codes in your printed programs. If you're tweeting, please use # Churchill Club. And finally, the code for internet access, HQRSJZ. It's my pleasure to now introduce our distinguished speakers. Ursula Burns leads one of America's oldest companies that today is a $22 billion global business. She has a wonderful story. She began at Xerox as a summer intern, and later, over a 30-year period, she worked her way to become the first female African-American CEO, and then also chairman of a Fortune 500 company. She serves on industry and academic boards such as American Express and the MIT Corporation. She also helps lead President Obama's national program on STEM, which of course is science, technology, engineering, and math. And she serves as vice chair of his Export Council. In 2009, Ursula ranked 9th in Fortune's list of the 50 most powerful women in business. George Colony leads Forrester Research, a company that he founded in 1983. George has grown Forrester into one of the most respected and successful global research and advisory firms, earning awards from Forbes and Fortune, as well as twice being named one of the top places to work in Massachusetts. He's a valued advisor to CEOs globally, and he also personally embraces social media. He tweets, and he writes regularly for his blog called The Counterintuitive CEO. Without further remarks, please welcome Ursula Burns and George Colony.
Okay, we got it right.
We had figured out how we would get up on the stage, and I decided to throw George a curveball. Start out with the upper hand up here.
Thank you, Karen, for having us. Much appreciated. And our conversation has already started, actually. It began almost a year ago. You were at the Forrester Forum. That was in Las Vegas in May of 2010. We had a great conversation.
It was really good.
Yep. And we've been sitting here continuing that conversation onward. So Glad you can all be with us. And I think we'll take questions at the end, Karen. That would be best. But if somebody really has to ask a question, raise your hand and we'll take it anytime. So you're a year and a half as CEO? How's it going?
2 years as CEO, I think.
Is it 2 years?
Yeah, I don't know how long it's been. I think I became the CEO in July of 2010.
Right.
No,
Nine.
July of 2009.
Right, yeah.
July of 2009. I have the same problem with my wedding date, by the way. It's good. Actually, it's really good. It would be embarrassing to complain about, how do you complain about being the CEO of something, anything? And then how do you complain about being the CEO of a company like Xerox that has, so much positive history that I've worked at for my whole career. So I have no complaints. I love it. It's a great job. It's different than I thought it would be. Very different.
What's been the most surprising thing about being CEO?
Yeah, when you become CEO, I think it's similar, even though I haven't done this yet, and I plan not to do it. It's similar to becoming the president of the United States, right? So you become the president, you say, well, life is going to be easy.
Right.
Because there's all these people who actually are there to help you. You have 130,000 people who work for you. And so you must have time in the day. People do things, right? People do things for you. You have. It turns out that you are the biggest server.
Everybody wants something, right?
Everybody wants something,
Yeah.
and with proper expectations. I mean, that's what you should do. So you become the biggest server, and all of these things that you thought happened when you became CEO, you end up doing. You end up going to call on customers. So there's so much time and varying level of urgent and important things to do, and so many personal, a couple of things. One is travel really surprised me, how much it entails if you really want to do the job correctly. And Xerox is a blue-collar company. We're a simple company. We have had leaders who, didn't come with like robes and silver spoons. We actually worked every day of our lives. So we never got into the mode of, well, you do this and you do that. So we actually feel it's our responsibility to do what we ask our team members to do. So we do it as well.
Right.
So it's amazing how much I have to travel. That's interesting. How many people want things. So the government wants things, your employee wants things, the customers want things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you respond, your family, remember those guys? Yeah. They want you to talk to them occasionally as well. That's the second thing, is how much diverting interest people have.
So are you sorting it all out? I mean, I'll tell you a story about Forrester. A couple of years ago, I said to my board, I can't do investor relations at the scale that I was doing it. I used to do road shows. I was probably on the road 4 or 5 days a quarter with investors. And I just said, I can't deal with these guys anymore. And I hired a very good CFO, a very senior guy, and he began to do all that work for me. Of course, I'm on the quarterly conference calls.
Right.
But I crossed it off the list. I mean, have you started to cross things off?
Not as much as I should yet.
Yeah.
So I'm still in the adding mode.
Right.
And
you'll subtract later, right?
I'll subtract later. So there are certain things that I think that is the responsibility of the CEO, especially if you start new, which I am, and you do something as big as we did when I came in. You have a responsibility to actually explain yourself.
Right.
And so Xerox had to explain itself. So in 2 ways, I had to explain me.
Was the acquisition of ACS, was that your doing, or was the board doing it? Was the board doing that before you arrived?
No, I've been in the company for 30 years. I was the president before I became the CEO. So there was no before
So
I
you
was
said yes to that?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
No, the acquisition of ACS was my doing.
Okay.
My doing is a strange, it's a hateful thing to say, my doing. Yeah, I sat in the office and did it. It was there's a set of decisions that ultimately fall to you, and those decisions fell to me. That's the way to say it. And it was definitely something that was a big transition for our company, and you needed to actually stand up and say what you were doing. And you have to kind of open up your kimono and say, here is what's good about what's happening to Xerox and the industry. Here's what's not so good, and here is why we're doing. Here's what we have that we can add, sell, add value to clients. So here's how we're doing that. It's the reason why. And I did that. The day that I became CEO was the day that we had, the day before that, we had the first meeting with ACS about going. So it was pretty interesting. So I become CEO. The day earlier, I had dinner with myself and the then chairman of the board and CEO Ann Mulcahy had dinner with the CEO of the company that we bought. And then, excuse me, all kind of crap hit the fan, right? Because you then say, well, we're going to do this. Yeah. And the more people that you disclose, this is an interesting set of problems. The more you disclose, the more invested you become in the decision, right? Even if it's wrong, you become very invested. So one of the things I had to do, and I'm pretty good at this, but I had to engage a lot of people, was to check ourselves every couple of weeks. So just because we told everybody we're going to do it, is it still the right thing?
And you would have pulled the plug?
For sure.
Yeah.
In a second. Mm-hmm. In a second. And there were many opportunities for us to do it, and many come to Jesus discussions with ourselves, mostly by phone. My CFO, my chief counsel, and myself saying, do we still want to go? There were no technical issues that we found. There was nothing like accounting or structure or all of the issues that I was focused on was on whether or not the people in the company would work for our company. We have a way that we run our company, a set of things that I believe in, a set of values that I want to make sure that we operate in and under and around. And if, occasionally I got nervous that these things were not natural in the DNA of the company that we were going to buy. And whenever that happened, you have to kind of step back and say, well, do we still want to do this? Fortunately, none of them were structural problems. And the concerns that we had were structural concerns, so we actually went forward. Yeah.
So I want to tell a story and then make a point, and then I want you to comment on this. Yeah. So for years, when I would meet with the CEOs of mainly the tech companies, John Chambers and Michael Dell, Scott McNeely, I would tell them that I thought that the greatest technology visionary of the 90s was Lou Gerstner. Because Lou Gerstner had come to IBM, and he had recognized that IBM couldn't simply just throw systems over the wall and hope that J.P. Morgan would implement correctly. He had the great insight to say, we've got to go over that wall and help these companies make these systems work. So I think he was a visionary because he saw that services was so critical. These other vendors, and I've argued with all the CEOs for years, that they should also be in the services business. They've all rejected those thoughts because they say, what is services? How do you do that? I mean, how do I manage professionals? How do I go from being a product company to actually, and we were talking about Jeannie Rometty, who by the way might be the next CEO of IBM. She was the one that actually did a lot of that work at IBM brilliantly. Mm-hmm. So how would you, let's say we're with John Chambers, how would you convince John Chambers, in fact, to drive Cisco toward services over the next 5 years?
And the good news, we use a different example because I think John gets it pretty much. So we have a very good and tight relationship with Cisco. And one of the reasons why that relationship started and flourished so quickly was because Cisco understands, John understands that he has more value to add than just a set of technology. That his employee base, the skill sets and the relationships that he's built with his clients allow him to do more for them. And so I think he's already there. The way that we got there...
There's no one to acquire at this point, though. They've all been picked off.
Not all of them, but yeah, I think that for the quality of a company like Cisco, I think acquisition is probably, I don't know what...
Plus they have $50 billion.
Yeah. The issue here is that he has capable people, and he has value proposition. And by the way, we would have not acquired anybody if we could have moved faster. It's just hard to move that fast, right? Yeah. So if you say to yourself, we wanted to build a services business, and we did. So we had a $15 billion company before we bought ACS. That $15 billion was broken down, $12 billion towards technology, printing, copiers, all that kind of stuff that we provide. It's really good, very profitable. Not high growth, but really cash strong. So really good business. I kind of like it. It's predictable. Not bad. I like it. You look at that, but then we didn't look at it from the fact that said, oh my goodness, how do we grow? I had this really simple thing. I spend a lot of time with our employees, our team members, and I've been in the company for 30 years, and I kept saying, what is it that we do? What is it that we do? People say, well, you're a copier company. I said, well, that's not what we do. We don't do that. We're a printer company, you're a document company. We don't do any of that. What we do is we help people, clients, customers, generally large, but we're trying to get smaller as well, companies transform very complex and burdensome business processes. So if you think about what we did first. So when Chet Carlson and Joe Wilson, Chet Carlson decided that he looked at this work process and he said, you mean to tell me that every time you want to create a duplicate of this page, you got to hire a person who writes it? Yeah. What do they do? So how many do you need? 50? We have 50 people who write it. Copy it down, literally write it. And maybe you can get it down to half that number of people by putting that mimeograph paper in between. Very messy, kind of ugly. That's what you have to do every time you want to create a second or a third. His question was, isn't there a better way to transform that very ridiculous, cost-intense, error-prone business process? So let's try technology. And there's this thing called photography. The guy down the street did it. Why don't we take a picture of every single page? Obviously, from that comes, how do we reproduce a set of business-critical documents using technology and not tying up people's time? What we did.
But why wouldn't Xerox, or why weren't you leading, you've been there 30 years, why weren't you leading Xerox to get in the services business itself?
Because we actually thought we were doing that over time. And we hadn't mined and milked the transformations in the technology business. So the first thing was to get from hand copying to machine copying. Then, instead of coloring the squares so that you can get red on the paper, you created a machine who could do it, right? Instead of scaling it, making it twice. So we actually had a lot of work to do to just get the business transformations in this core technology business. But then we step back and you say, we've done it all. It's not all done, but a lot of it, it's largely done. So you can make it bigger and smaller, you can make a print copy fax, you can turn it upside down, you can whatever you want to do, make it even look better than the original. And then you step back and say, so what is it that you really do? What do we have? We have a great company brand, which it took me a long time to understand that that was an important thing. I'm an engineer.
And the brand is still strong, right?
The brand is very strong and permission-rich. People actually say to us all the time, well, you do that. And we sit back and go, we don't really do that. But if you think so,
fine, right?
We'll go with you. You do that, or the question would be, can you do that? So what we found with this, during some of the worst times of our company, we found that people actually either thought we could, or wanted us to do more for them. So this is this amazing brand, strong, really great. We have people everywhere in the world. It's amazing. We do business with P&G. P&G has people everywhere in the world. They want us to do the same thing in the US for them as we could do in Germany or Bangladesh or you name it. And we can do that. We can pull it off because we literally have people, most of them work directly for us, and we can, not easily, but we can all line them up and say, okay, everybody push the button at 12:01. And everybody pushes the button at 12:01. It's very difficult for many people to do that. We're global. Right. And the third thing that we have, which is amazing, is that we actually invent solutions. And we like this. We're a company that actually doesn't get nervous about throwing a whole bunch of money into research and development. This is kind of like cool. We do it, and people say, well, how do you know the answer is going to be right? We say, well, you don't. That's what it's called, research, right? It's called inventing. So you don't know the answer, but we are pretty confident in the people that we have and the processes that we go through being able to deliver value at the end of the day. And we've had a history of this. So these three things are what we have that allow us to differentiate ourselves. It's not about whether or not we can create a copying machine. By the way, I'm glad that we did that. Not whether we can do a printing and multifunctional device. I'm glad we did that. What can you use these three things to do more of? And we sat back right when I became CEO and said, okay, so now what would you do? We said, let's talk to our customers. Really kind of a novel idea. And they said, well, you do this and this and this. We said, well, we don't, but we can. And that's where we started down this thing. Why don't you manage the infrastructure?
That led towards services.
That led us towards services, kept dragging us. We work with legal clients all over the world, and they say...
So do you agree that I believe, that every large tech company must be in the services business?
I think
But when I say in the services business, I don't mean break fix. I mean 30 to 40% of the revenue must come from services.
I think
That's
every large tech company has to pay attention to their customers.
And that means being in service. That means being able to help them, right?
If their customers need help, if their companies need help that has something to do with what you do, meaning your skill set, your value propositions can actually surround the customer with that, the answer is you'd be silly to not pursue it. Like, why would you leave that to somebody else? They love you already. They trust you already.
I think if you talk to Larry Ellison, he will say, well, gee, IBM's in the services business because their systems are so bad. that they've got to have services to help those systems be deployed in the correct way.
Yeah, I wish
that's the constant.
Yeah, I wish that it was that way. I wish that people ran business. I don't have those kind of conversations. I just don't.
Yeah.
We don't literally have a conversation that says, well, your plumbing is so bad you should become an electrician.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, we actually approach, and I actually don't know Larry Ellison well, and I would hope that that's not how he thinks about it either. The approach is, what do you have that you're really good at, and how do you leverage that? Mm-hmm. It's not how do you get yourself out of a corner. That's not why you go into a business. How do I get myself out of a corner? The other business I'm in is just so bad that I'm going to go into another business so I can. That's not the way it works. Not for me. So I don't think that a lot of, and I know a lot of the CEOs, I don't think that a lot of them approach it that way. They actually are trying to leverage the assets, the skills, the things that make them different in a broader set. And I think that's a good thing to do. That's a good thing for American business, for sure.
Let's talk about the economy. And
what economy? Do we have an economy, George? You tell me about the economy.
Well, I'll give you the Forrester numbers. So we have a bunch of economists at Forrester, and we are saying that the tech economy, this is worldwide, will grow about 10% this year. By the way, the U.S. will be the slowest growing large country in that economy, growing about 7%. So we're at about 10% IT growth this year, but dropping in 2012 to about 9.5%. So the tech economy, to us at least, feels very, very strong. Is that what you're feeling out there?
No, not at all.
You think we are? Well, my view of this.
So let me say more about
my view of this is that we're crawling a wall of worry, which says we've come out of a bad recession, and that every setback, people are throwing up their hands and saying, double dip time. We're going to recession. But my belief is that we're going to slowly pull out of this recession, and it's not going to be a brilliant recovery, but it will take 2 to 3 more years. But we'll continue to recover.
I agree with that. I agree that we are definitely in a recovery mode. But, I mean, we have short memories in America and shorter memories in business. It's very annoying. So you got to remember.
Well, we're going to talk about that. I think that's
you got to remember 2009. I don't know who remembers 2009. It was horrible. It was, I mean, literally, I remember sitting in rooms in 2009 where we thought we were going to close down. Not Xerox, I mean the world. The world is going to implode. Right. We quickly forget these things, and we say, yeah, but now, growth of 10%, slow recovery. We are in a slow recovery back to a level of growth over 2009, but very, very few people are back to 2007, 2008 numbers. Maybe 2008, because 2008 ended up being at the end of the year.
No, we're not talking about the tech economy. We're talking about the general economy.
The general economy.
Yeah.
So,
probably right.
So we are better than we were in 2009, still trying to get back to like the 3rd grade. It's kind of like being left back.
Yeah.
And you say, now I'm back to the 5th grade, which is where I should have been 2 years ago. So that's basically where we are. So what do I see with the economy? I think we have a certain set of facts in the United States and around the world, the United States primarily. And I'm removing for the world right now China. That's the one place. I'm not even India. I'm going to include India in this discussion, China outside, because they have a very different system, a very different set of dynamics in their marketplace. So here's how our economy looks, and developed economies look. That most developed economies have structural unemployment that's higher today by orders of magnitude, measurable orders of magnitude, than they've had in their recent past. The United States hasn't.
But Germany would be excluded.
Germany is excluded from that. Germany is the, I was going to get to Germany. Germany is the one economy that is sitting there. We should all rush there and try to sell things to the Germans because they're growing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And that's what everybody else is doing. But the United States has unemployment, structural unemployment at 9, 10%. Well, I think you can make any number you want, but I think when you get to 9 and you say 9 is for real, that means you're like at 12 or 13, right? The Southern European countries are at structural unemployment in the 20% numbers. You go to the UK, it has double-digit unemployment. So you say to yourself, okay, 10%, these are millions and millions of people, don't work. They have families who they cannot take care of, and the way that they are taking care of those families, they're drawing on a central pool of resources that the people who do work throw into, or the governments throw into by creating debt. So while I think that we can find companies that are doing better in the short term, they're manipulating positively the market, their position in the market to do better, I think we're in for a pretty difficult couple of years.
But we're in agreement here that it's a slow crawling up the wall of worry. Recovery, 2% GDP growth.
I don't think it's worry, though. Worry would mean to me that there is a concern with not a lot of backing, or I think this is not worry. This is reality. We're going to have years of Xerox Corporation and Ursula Burns making the earnings number. We will absolutely do it, and there's no doubt about it. Team. So make sure you're not confused here.
Right.
So we'll do that.
You're not announcing anything tonight.
No.
Right?
We'll sell more. But underneath that, how we get to those numbers, how everybody is to literally manage really tightly around the vest, really tightly, and that's not ideal. It constrains risk. It constrains chance. It constrains starts. I just don't feel it. We didn't make the economy that we have today by operating so close to the vest. I think that we are in for a set of changes if we don't figure out a way to loosen it up. And when I listen to these economists, which I try not to ever listen to, and the TV programs that drive me crazy.
Why don't you listen to them?
Because they actually don't live in the real world. They live in numbers, right?
Yeah.
They do numbers. They do analysis about numbers. And I get up every day, and most of us do, and we walk into an office building. And as we walk into the office building, you walk into people who are nervous about their jobs. You walk into people who are telling you what they're really doing, not the culmination of a set of numbers, but individuals that say, I don't think I can send my kid to college. We're gonna, there's a whole bunch of reality that kind of averages out. And I'm going to say a story. Unfortunately, I'm on the news, but I'm a member of the Business Roundtable. Great organization, really, really good. And they do a good job in interacting with government officials. And we had Tim Geithner speak at the Business Roundtable not too long ago. And I said,
are you impressed by him?
Yeah, very.
Because I saw him at the World Economic Forum, and I didn't think he was selling the United States in a very positive light. I didn't find him impressive.
I find him extremely impressive.
He's a good thinker.
He's a very good thinker. I think he's very, very smart. I don't think he's a politician at all. That's probably why I like him more than most. Right. By the way, I don't know him very, very well, but I actually I think he's a pretty solid citizen here and trying to do a good job. But anyway, he was speaking, and I asked him the question after he was done. I said, when I listen to you, I feel better than when I go to live in the real world. And I said, I think I figured out why. Because he actually averages everything over the 300 million people. You know what I mean? It's like, and he averages over a longer time.
He's macro, not micro.
He's macro, not micro. And we're living every day in
the micro world.
Micro,
right?
And so, and by the way, the good news is that we have somebody who's macro, because if we tried to do everything on the micro, we would slit our throats. But I realized that he has a different perspective on things, and from how I lead, from my history, everything, I do things very much on the micro, very much on the reality, very much on the
next deal, the next person you hire. I mean,
that's the micro world. Yeah, that's not necessarily the next deal. Yeah. I've managed to get out of that, or else I wouldn't sleep at all. But definitely the next person I hire, the capabilities, near term and long term. So I do a lot of micro, so that I can actually see and live the macro. But I don't disconnect. I don't believe that they're disconnected. So it's
we were having a great conversation over dinner about. So you're on the advisory. You advise MIT, and I'm actually on the. There's a new school at Harvard called the School of Engineering and Applied Science.
Yay!
Anyway,
they actually are friends. So MIT and
well,
Harvard.
back in 1900, MIT and MIT president and the Harvard president got together and said, Harvard said, "You take the nerds, and we'll go that way." Yep. So Harvard got out of the engineering business, but they now reneged on it, and they're back. They have a School of Engineering and Applied Science, and I advise it. And so I'm at this advisory committee, and there's some recent graduates, and I said, "What are you all doing?" They said, "We're all on Wall Street." So these are people who went to Harvard to study engineering, got out, and they went to Wall Street. Don't you think this is part?
No, I'm just standing up because my pants are, and this thing gets me crazy. This subject gets me crazy, I'll tell you.
I knew I was going to push your button. So, But don't you think we all have to, there are probably a lot of bankers in this room we're going to offend here in the next 10 minutes, but don't you think that this is really the seed of America is the best and the brightest going into a profession which is not adding enough value to the society and to the economy?
So I will preface my comments by saying I've never been a banker or a lawyer. So
Me too.
I've never been a banker or a lawyer. I do work with bankers and lawyers, and by the way, I like them.
They help us. Yeah. They help us, yeah.
No, I'm serious. I mean, I
agree.
they're my best friends.
Yeah.
But then I'll end and say the following. You know, one of the things that I've learned, I was raised by a mother who could only hope for better in the future. Because the reality that she had of today was not enough to keep her going. If you know what I mean? It was.
So she was sustained by her belief in the future.
She was sustained by her belief in the future. It was important. She was sustained by her belief in what we could do to make the world a better place. She was literally a real visionary woman who had didn't know what the word meant. She obviously did. She was well educated, but so when I was raised, we were given a set of expectations that were around value creation, around being good people, around being nice people, you know, being respectful. So if you meet my kids today, they will call you Mr. Colony, even if you tell them 100 times to call you George. Yeah. And we were raised a certain way to believe that there is today, but more importantly, there's tomorrow, and there's you, but more importantly, there are others. We, over the last, I think, 15 or 20 years, threw that entire philosophy in the garbage, I mean America. And we've gotten into this really interesting thing that says the goal here is to make as much money as you possibly can, as quickly as you can, even if you know it doesn't create any value. So even if
it might be wrong.
And it's probably wrong for you. It has nothing to do with
wrong for the society.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with what you like. Yeah, actually, I mean, so I go to MIT. You go to Harvard. I go to MIT, the school that creates, this is arguably, no argument at all, the best engineering school in the world. Period, end of discussion.
I agree.
Nobody will debate it. Yep. Nobody will debate it. And nobody.
That guy will.
Well, I'll say the following. Fools will debate it. How about that? But the best engineering school in the world, and I go and I speak to the class one day. My son actually just graduated on June 2nd from this school, so I'm pretty proud of it, yeah. But anyway, this is before he went to the school. I spoke to the class, some kids who were gathered in Simmons Hall. And it started out to be a small crowd, but it ended up being a bigger crowd. It was one of the most cool things that ended up happening. I'm speaking, I'm pontificating about all kinds of neat stuff, and I happened to ask the question of one of these kids who happened to be like a guide of my son, who was only a junior at that point in high school. And I said, so what are you going to do when you finish? He was the head of the volleyball team, you know, striking boy, just amazing. They don't have like ones and twos in the class, but one of the leaders in the class. He says he's going to J.P. Morgan Chase. I said, what did you study? He said, well, electrical engineering, computer science. I said, okay. So I finished. I kept talking, and it was stuck in my head. And I said, by the way, who's graduating this year? So half the class raises their hand. I said, so good, it's good. Where are you? Tell me where some of you guys are going. So they start shouting out names. And I realized that the names I hear more than any other names, it's not Bechtel, it's not Google, it's J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs. So I said, okay, let me restate. How many of you guys are going into industry to do engineering? How many of you guys are going into banking? More than half the room. Yeah. And I said, so why? Why? And this one kid said $170,000. And by the way, I said the same thing. I went, $170,000? This is a blinking number. You say that number, I would pause as well, right? Because I hire engineers all the time, and we don't pay them $170,000 out of school. So I said, I got it. So it's the money. And the answer was, yeah, across the board.
But what's wrong with money? Now I'll be circuitous. I'll
So
go
now,
around.
so what's
wrong with this?
There's not a damn thing wrong with money.
Because wait, these
But-
kids used to go to work for Xerox because Xerox was high paid. That was 30 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, Xerox created value that created jobs that did solve real problems. I'm not going to say all that J.P. Morgan does or Goldman does is
a waste of time.
Is a waste of time, but I mean, these guys go into labs and do derivative trading, and you wonder, once we figured out all that, what that meant, we all now know what that meant, guess what we know, guess what it is? Nothing.
Yeah.
I'm serious. We didn't say that. I didn't
is.
say that. It is really nothing.
So
What do you say, wait a minute now, why do we take these minds who have the capability, who've gone through one of the most rigorous programs in the world, who can solve problems like we don't have potable water, we don't have distribution systems for medicine, we have an unbelievable fundamental problem with energy. We are digging a damn hole that's so big on energy we can't figure it out. Instead of actually driving them towards these types of places that pay $100,000.
Yeah.
Now, why not go do that? Because there's not enough. I'm hoping, my hope, George, is that after a couple of years of $170,000, they go to an energy company and try to help us solve the goddamn energy problems, or go to Xerox and try to create good jobs.
So they'll go to Goldman Sachs, be disenchanted, then go on.
And then go on. I'm hoping that's what it comes out to be.
But we got to realize, I mean, the parents have to lead them in the right direction, right? I mean,
Yeah, but I tell you what.
What do you tell your kids about what they
My
should
kids
do?
are clear. My kids are
They're cool, right?
Yeah.
They're not at Goldman Sachs, right?
not at all.
Yeah.
Now,
But how did you? I tell my kids that they should do something great in life, and they should do something that is constructive and helps the society.
So the
now,
first
they
thing,
ignore me, but you
yeah.
know,
My first thing. Do they ignore you?
they ignore. I have
Join the
three
club.
boys. They didn't ever listen to one
Join
word
the
I said.
club. I tell my kids from the time that they were small. It's something my mother told me. This is before I knew what having kids was like. My mother told me, find something you love to do. She would always say that.
What if it's make money?
Then go do that.
Yeah.
Go do that. By the way, if that's what you find, I have no problem if those 60% of the class that they just love to make, I doubt that that's where they ended up. There's some other coercion there. But if that's what they want to do, I say fine. So find something you love to do. And by the way, it may take you a while to do that. Some people luck out early and get there. It'd probably take you a couple of iterations and rounds to do it. So that's why I still have hope for these engineers who go to Goldman or go to J.P. Morgan or go to Citi. They may actually get back to something that they love. First, find something that you love. I also say poverty sucks. So be pretty good at what you do. I mean, this is not about being a crusader and trying to live, on the dollar
With
a
no
day.
money, right?
No money. That's not it either.
Yeah.
But there is a point, and I say this all the time to all kids, any age. There is a point, and there's a woman at our table, a young woman at our table.
She's in college.
She's a junior in college. There's a point when it doesn't make a damn bit of difference how much money you make. Make sure, I tell you what, you get there quickly. Right, and so here you make $100,000. So I'll use a better example. You make $1 million. Would you change your life to make $1.2 million? People say, yeah, I'll do that. To make $1.3 million, to make $1.4 million. There is a point where you're comfortable and good. I don't mean like comfortable, sit back and not work. I mean comfortable, the cycle is pretty good. You can meet the needs of your circle, which is generally pretty large if you're the major earner and you're pretty cool at it. You don't make trade-offs in those areas. You don't jump. We went through this whole time where people jump from company to company. It's because every company they went to, they can make more money. Unfortunately, I never got into that. I actually liked where I worked. My kids were happy where they were going to school. So I got more job offers than you could imagine that would pay me $150,000, $200,000 more. And fortunately, I could make the decision that $200,000 is pretty good, but it was not worth the disruption. Yeah. I had a foundation that gave me a pretty comfortable way to view money, a good way to view money. I like more than less, so I don't want anybody to think I don't like more than less. But I also know that there is a point where there is too much, where there's significantly more than you need. And
so let's talk about innovation. We would hope for our society and for the world next 10 years that these kids don't head in that direction, but head out toward a world which is more, where they're dedicated to innovation.
Yep.
And I think that the conventional wisdom is that America is the iPod defines the future of America. Designed in California, built in China. That America will become a place of high innovation, and that will be our way forward.
It has been our way forward from the beginning of time.
I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
And you know Neil Ferguson? You ever met Neil? He's the
Yeah,
professor at Harvard.
Yeah, Harvard.
He wrote that great book. He's an economist.
Yeah.
And he said that the reason that the Western world moved ahead of India and China after 1550 was we had 7 killer apps. Mm-hmm. I'm going to forget them all. One of them is healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And he said that China will be able to copy all 7 killer apps except innovation. Mm-hmm. That's his view. That society will not accept failure, does not have the ability to think in these creative ways. Now, I'm not saying I'm agreeing with him. This is what he said. So our killer app will be innovation. So let's talk about what that might look like in the future.
So let me first talk about innovation as a killer app, and then whether or not we can sustain it and what it would look like.
And can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
Xerox, when I came into the industry, which was 30 years ago, Xerox was one of the most innovative companies on the planet, actually. Xerox PARC, I actually remember seeing the Alto 2 at Xerox PARC in 1979 and going, that is extraordinary. Somehow there's a story here about Xerox and PARC. I know you're sick of telling that story, but how you had all those innovations, but then couldn't leverage them. So we should talk, I think, between us about what is innovation, but also how innovation is practically deployed, practically used, practically brought into our businesses.
And there's two different discussions. Make sure I get to both. One is how do you actually get to the point where you can create cycle-changing, game-changing futures for yourself, and then what do you do with them? And there's two completely different things. And the first part of the discussion about China, India, et cetera, and whether or not America can do it is on the first part, can we create it? Do we have the wherewithal on a go-forward basis to continue to be the engine, to have an engine of innovation that drives a good, strong economy? I am not concerned, wholly unconcerned about China's innovation engine or India's, and I'm hoping that they create some innovation as well and do it really well. My focus is on ours, and I'm very concerned about ours. And it's not the guys who are sitting at MIT, they are the converted, right? Those guys, even if they go to banking, at least they know what the hell math and science is about. If you look at the vast majority of our young people in this country, they live in cities, or they live in underserved rural areas. This is the vast majority, 80% of the kids. If you look at the educational systems in these places, they are woefully inadequate. They're inadequate.
Some are failing, in fact.
Very many of them by any standard except for the ones that we set for ourselves that are easy enough to pass, because we just keep changing changing the damn thing so that somebody can pass it. If you look at the vast majority of these kids, they are incapable of competing or competing against themselves, and contributing to this whole cycle of complex problem, apply brains to it, solve the problem, the innovation.
Right.
Big opportunity. We are creating a fundamental underclass, or what I call population that must be served in order to meet the minimum standards.
And you think the failure, Ursula, is education?
That is
the
education,
root cause of this.
the big E, not the small e, not the school, not the teacher only, not the book or the money. It's not that. It's the whole system that we've put in place. It's this level of entitlement and easiness. And I'm going to use an example that I always use, and it's my daughter is 5 foot 2 inches tall. She's amazing girl, very articulate, extremely cute, very, very smart. She decided that because her brother was a volleyball player, she was going to be a volleyball player too. So she's 5 foot 2. Yeah. And she's a girl. And what I mean by that, she's like a girl. And so her idea...
I only have boys, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
Perspiring and making her hair get fizzy was not high on her list of things to do in a day. But she joined the volleyball team, and she made the team. She went to a little private school in Rochester, upstate New York. I remember going to her games, and after the second game or third grade, I was like really confused. I'm like, so I go to the coach and said, so what, let's explain this team to me. He said, yeah, everybody plays, we rotate them in. I said, so what's the goal here? And he said, well, everybody plays, we rotate them in. I said, so is it to win the games? He said, oh, no. I said, interesting. So this is not a competitive volleyball team. This is truly a game. A game. No measures, so the kids can do whatever the hell they want. It's a game. They said, no, we want everybody to participate and feel like a winner. And I said, wrong. What the hell is that about? You don't feel like a winner unless you win.
Unless you're a winner. Right, yeah.
So we have a system now that has, I think, deployed this belief that everyone should, independent of effort, independent of result, independent of performance, you should at least feel good about something. And my response is no. No. By the way, you can have a volleyball team that doesn't compete. That's good. That's the true game. But if you want to have score, score.
Have a real team.
You have a team, right? Or else just play back and forth. And if you're going to be in school, we can't have this system that says, yeah, it's okay. All you can do is, we can't keep you after school. Right. No, you can't do extra homework. People can't fail. I think I'm the result of an urban, underprivileged, regular old system with a parent, one of them, who said, performance matters. And your best effort matters. And I think that that's part of the problem, where we actually have expectations that okay is good enough. So we'll just get you, everybody to okay, everybody's okay, and then we can move. Everybody's happy, we're all pleased, everybody feels really good. So now we'll go to second grade, right? And then we'll do some stuff, and then we'll go to third grade. I actually believe that there is no different from the Indian child to the American child, except for how much emphasis we put on what's really important with these children. And I think what we're doing today, unfortunately, we don't have an infrastructure that does this well. Families have broken down. So, okay, we have to now pretend that we have to create an infrastructure around that. So we'll do this. Part of the STEM work is we know that we can't make up families overnight. If you have bad parents or absent parents or busy parents,
somehow,
you have to figure out a way to work around it some way. Yeah. But you have to literally have very high expectations and put time and energy, effort into having a good outcome. That's one of the issues. We have to have teachers who are able to teach. We have to point people. We have to celebrate Dean Kamen, or the guy who won the Nobel Prize in physics, and not LeBron James, who could stand in the line and make 50,000 shots. Yeah. That's good too. But there's only one of him.
One guy.
There's a lot more scientists out there. So we have to celebrate things that are good. So there's a whole part of a lot of the value chain that has to change for us to be able to be as good as the great generations were before us. And then people say to me all the time, but look, we got Google. I said, so now you're telling me we got, Serge and Larry. I said, so now you're going to give me, it's like saying, yeah, you gave me the two guys in the millions who actually figured out this solution. And by the way, some of them were immigrants. So we have to literally put in energy and effort so we can get out what we want here. And what we want are people who can contribute to society. I think a lot of the contribution can happen in science, technology, engineering, and math. But teaching is fine, and whatever it is. But you can't kind of skip your way there. You can't take a shortcut. And as parents and as people who are the talented, we're sitting in this thing in the Four Seasons, so you got something here, right? We didn't pick you up off the street. You have something here. You have to help. You have to help. You have to get two kids, and make sure that they understand that work, this requires work and energy. It's not always going to be fun. It's not always going to be easy, but it will be overall fun and easy. At the end of the day, it's a short amount of time that you invest for a really great outcome.
Seymour Papert called this hard fun.
Hard fun.
Hard fun.
Yeah, hard
Playing
fun.
the piano is, you can't just sit down and play the piano. It's, you got to work, 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 and then it will be very
It'd
fun
be
at the end of
very
it.
fun. So, my thing on this whole idea of innovation is that I think the good news about America is that we are still today, we're trying to change this one too, but don't get me on this subject, a country of immigrants. We are a country that actually lets people who have less in, and they actually aspire to have more. And this whole cycle of less to more is the cycle that has caused this country to be what it is today. And the good news is we still have that cycle happening. We're trying to choke off some of the immigrants, which is not the best thing in the world. But still, you know, I'm not going to
But this keeps you hopeful.
This keeps me hopeful.
This cycle, right? Yeah.
And we have unbelievable secondary schools. It's amazing.
Yeah.
We have Stanford University, we have Caltech, we have Yale, we have Harvard, Princeton, okay, you name them all. We have the SUNY system, we have the Cal State system.
Somebody said there are more great universities in Ohio than there are in Germany.
Right.
One state.
We have places for you to go, not only for the people who are born here, for a lot of different people, to come, get used to this country, to get friendly with this country, to innovate, to contribute. I think that's a good thing. Now we have to fix, for our side, the feeder base. And the feeder base is absolutely broken today. It's in fundamental disrepair. And so we have to fix that.
So let's get off this topic, and let me run an idea by you, see how you react to this. So at Forrester, we look at a lot of innovation. What is innovation? And we have this concept that we call innovation networks. It says that, because most CEOs think of innovation as being, you know, within the four walls of the company, someone's in there. It's the old Xerox model, actually. There's an engineer who invents something in Xerox, and then you go out and sell that invention. So the innovation networks idea says that it's actually a value chain, that there's an inventor in the picture, but then there's also a transformer in the picture. I'll come back to what that transformer is. Inventor, we understand what an inventor is. There's a financier in the picture, and there's a broker in the picture. Actually, Forrester might, in fact, be considered a broker. Accenture could be considered a broker. What's important in this value chain is the transformer. And that's, and as an example, Apple Computer. Apple didn't invent most of what's in this device, but they found these inventions all over the world from inventors, and then they bring it all together and they transform it into a product. So it's a value chain. It's not within the four walls of the company. And the CEO of Procter & Gamble, A.G. Lafley, I'm sure you know A.G., when he got the job in 2000, he became CEO of Procter & Gamble. And he said, I want to do the math on Procter & Gamble. How many customers do we have? They have 2 billion customers at Procter & Gamble. He said, okay, how many engineers do I have? You have about 10,000 engineers who can create products for you. He did the math and said, there's no way we can create enough products with the number of engineers we have at P&G. So he went out and said, we're going to take inventions from all over the world, and we'll bring them back into P&G and we'll transform them. In fact, they partnered with Clorox, one of their big arch enemies, on something called Press and Seal, which I don't even know what that is, but it's a great cellophane, I guess. And it's now a billion-dollar product. So what do you make of this idea that it won't all be invented at Xerox, but rather you could be in a value chain, and you've got to be looking all over the world for those inventions, or maybe even you may be looking for financiers to help you finance this? That it's a worldwide effort and not a U.S. effort. See, a lot of politicians get this wrong. Politicians say, draw a line around the United States and say, no ideas can come in or can come out. But the Innovation Network would say, no, we must enlarge the network, not diminish the network. How do you react to that?
So the reality of Xerox today and even 10 years ago or 9 years ago was that there was not these walls at all.
Well, Fuji Xerox.
Fuji Xerox, Cisco. We're in strong partnership with Cisco around cloud computing. We know we're not the best at this thing. These are guys who are pretty good at it. Why would you not work with them? HCL, we just formed an arrangement with HCL where we literally sent 600 of our engineers to HCL and said, you work there, you use our engineers to learn something about what we do, give us scale, give us global footprint, Flextronics. We took all of our manufacturing infrastructure and we said to them, for the office products, take this, we're going to give you everything from the tools to the people, from the people to the tools, I guess, and you take it and you morph it for us and actually make it significantly more relevant. We'll stay with you along the way so that you can actually continue to add value to us, relevant value to us. So this idea that you can innovate inside your four walls, I would be surprised if there's any company who actually thinks that. I know Xerox doesn't.
You walk around Silicon Valley, you're going to find some.
Yeah,
But the Apple is doing a good job at information networks. You go to Google, there's a lot of secrecy in these companies, and there's,
yeah, and by the way,
they don't want ideas moving in and out of their walls.
I don't know a lot about the new companies. I do know about Xerox and the older companies. I have the benefit of having on my board Bob McDonnell, who's the CEO of Procter & Gamble, so I know a lot about Procter & Gamble and about how we help them. We help them through partnering with them, through jointly innovating. If you look at our labs here, the lab in Park, the CEO of Park, Steve Hoover, raise your hand, is here.
Steve.
Park does about half of its research for Xerox, a little bit less than half. So where the hell does the rest of it go? Who does he do it for? For the government, for companies all over the world, because we know, and these other companies know, and the government knows that they can't actually hold it all themselves. There's very little value in doing that. There's a huge amount of risk, and it's not the most creative environment. If the only thing you can do is talk to our guys. So I agree that the idea of research, the value chain of research, has fundamentally changed in the world. This whole, this thing that's called partner or perish.
Yeah.
It was publish or perish. Now it's partner or perish.
Right, yeah.
It is. It is the reality of the world. Not only in manufacturing or in go-to-market schemes. It's the reality in research as well. Fundamentally, you get better ideas. You get better interactions. You have to work with your clients. You have to get different thought processes. You have to get access to different ways of doing things so that you can actually be the most creative. So I absolutely agree. I also agree, I actually agree that you have to partner.
You have to reach out.
You have to reach out, and if you don't do that, by the way, I think you can be a very successful company and not reach out, but I think you can be an even more successful company if you do reach out, including the people who you don't particularly like, right? Which is, you can't get too wrapped up in that. You have to respect them, but you don't have to like them. But so you work together and you reach out. The idea of a transformer, also absolutely required. Not all transformers, but I don't think that the value chain, I don't think that any space in these four places is better than the other or more important than the other. I think it is important to have them all. And it's not necessarily important that you do them all. So very often, and one of the things that happened to Xerox early in its days, this is 50 years, I don't know how many years ago it was, when it was very unusual to partner, we thought of things that we couldn't get to market. Now, there will not be a thing that we think of that somehow or the other, if it's valuable, doesn't find its way to market. We'll either bring it to market, or we literally will form a joint venture, license it, you name it, because it'll get out there and it'll create some value for us, but it'll create some value for us and some value for users.
So the speed is most important. You know it's going to get out there to somebody. You got to do it fast.
We're going to do it.
Right.
We have to do it fast, and we have to figure out a way to monetize it in the most appropriate way. I am not convinced. I am 100% convinced. So I'm not convinced of the contrary to this. I'm 100% convinced that not everything that we create we can make into a business. I'm 100% convinced of that. And I have labs around the world, 5 of them, that actually have a major piece of their mission to find things that we will never use but can make some money somehow or the other. That's what their goal is. That's one of the things that Park does. They're in clean tech. They're in solar. They're in batteries. What the hell? We don't do that.
Right.
And probably won't ever do it as a full-time thing. We don't know the customer set. We don't know the value chain of that. We will partner with somebody who does, though. We'll get somebody who will help us be the transformer in these business areas. So I do believe that it's important to actually have this chain, to be fairly democratic, to not be selfish, and
not to take too much of the profit yourself. And
this idea about, I wish it was as easy as that. I think that you could say, I take all the profit for ourselves. You couldn't. It's just not possible to do. I mean, you can't be competitive. You can't be as global as you want to be. You can't serve as many clients as you want if you try to do it all yourself.
So we're going to take questions in a moment. But before we do that, I'll ask a question to you and also to myself. And that is, what is going to happen in the next 10 years? What is your vision of the next 10 years?
So it's interesting.
You go and then I'll go.
Yeah, I usually say, how ridiculous of you to ask me a question about the next 10 years where I couldn't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. But I won't do that today. George.
You can stop right there if you want, but I'll talk.
You know, I think that in the next 10 years we will have, we will be right in the midst of a set of severe problems that will be on the cusp of being solved. And the problems will be around.
So you're pessimistic in the 10 years, but positive in the 20 years.
Yeah, and I think that the pessimism, I'm not pessimistic like, you know, the world is going to come to an end, or there's going to be a dark cloud. I just think that it will take us longer than it should to solve some of the problems, but I think that we are now realizing that they are problems. So we'll have an energy crisis in this country in the next 10 years. Crisis. Prices will be higher than most people, particularly the poorer people, can afford to actually
heating
operate.
Oil, gas, et cetera.
Heating oil, gas, anything that chain. So it'll drive up the cost of foods. I think we're also in a food problem.
Yep.
That will drive an ecological problem. You know what I mean? So we just don't have a good way of growing, distributing food in a sustainable way.
We're talking globally here.
Globally,
yeah.
and unfortunately, based on how we're managing our farm systems, I mean, we better depend
we'll
on
be in
the
trouble
globe.
here
We'll
too.
be trying, right, exactly. But I do believe, though, and you know, education will be at the cusp of. The good news is we'll be at the cusp of change on all of these things, because for the first time in a long time, I think people are actually talking about them as real problems, not political footballs. They're still political footballs, but they're speaking about them in real problems, and people are trying to come together, throwing away boundaries to work together to try to solve energy problems and food problems. So I'm actually fairly hopeful about it. I do believe that this idea about innovation, this pace of innovation, and the tethers that we have to home and office will be almost totally broken. I don't think that they will exist at all anymore. I think that even these things that we all have will be fundamentally different. They'll obviously be smaller, but they'll be so natural to the way that work is done and the way that play is done and the way that we communicate, and that things will fundamentally change.
Yeah, so my vision of the future really involves these types of devices. So I don't know if you all saw this, but there's a couple of computer scientists that I think are at IEEE, and they've been benchmarking supercomputers for 30 years. And they benchmarked, this is the iPad 2, they benchmarked this and said this is running at 1.65 gigaflops, or billions of floating point instructions per second.
Pretty impressive.
Well, in 1994, this would have been equivalent to a 8-core Cray 2. Remember that, the bench around it? In 1993, this would have been classed as one of the top 33 supercomputers in the world. So so my thesis, and I'm going to get kind of parochial here about tech, is that we're about to go through an architectural shift. And the Microsoft model of all executables or programs on the desktop is dead because it doesn't leverage the cloud. That's dead. The cloud model is also not going to be the answer.
No, it's a transition point.
You know why? Because of these devices. If you look at the basic curves, Moore's law, we have a doubling of processing every 1.5 years. There's actually a curve above Moore's law, which I call Hitachi's law, which says that storage is doubling every 1.2 years. That says the periphery of the network is getting incredibly intelligent. So if you're saying it's all going to be in the cloud or all going to be in the web, you're completely wrong. We think the future architecture, we call it app internet, which says very powerful devices with very powerful apps which are interpolating with the cloud transparently. And that is the future of architecture. And we believe the web is a dying technology, that the web will be always here, but that is not the final answer because the web is too based at the center. And I thought Google came out with a Chromebook. Questions?
No, I'm just looking at Steve because we talked about this
you
exactly
did?
earlier.
Well, Google came out with a Chromebook, I don't know, a month ago. That was the highest class of corporate idiocy I've ever seen. I mean, because they're denying this, which is crazy. So my view of the next 10 years is, this is the story of tech. This has been the next story of Xerox, that the world doesn't stop turning. It keeps turning, innovation keeps happening, and those who are successful will be less successful, and they can hope that they will bounce back and be successful.
You have
once
to
again.
transform.
That is the story.
I actually think that there is a problem in this story.
Yeah.
And that's that the story actually gives us access to data, but it gives, when I say us, it gives us, human beings, with the the flops.
Gigaflops, right?
Yeah, we're at a 0.1 millionth of the flop. I mean, we still process and think and work, can sort in a certain pace.
Yeah.
It's getting faster, by the way, but it's still, even my kids are not capable of looking at, sorting through, accessing, retrieving all the crap that we're giving them. I mean, we literally, with all of this great stuff, we still have to get it interfaced to a person.
Right.
Who can use it, make it useful and make it usable. And I think that the miracle is not going to be in what's capable in these computers. I think the miracle, the big transformations, and this is one of the things that we're working on, is how do you use it? How do you
interface with it, right? The man-machine interface problem.
Yeah, how do you actually sort through all the crap? Is there an easy way to align all this stuff around a subject? Because having it all is really great, but you can't, today you can't use it all. People used to say to me all the time, so E is equal to MC squared. Do you remember what M is? And what, M is variable, so-and-so. And so what's the speed of light? I always say to my son, well, I said to him, I know that number. Why don't you know it? He would say to me, Mom, I don't need to know it. I can just look at it on the computer. Right? Now, at least he knows what it is he's looking for, right? We're going to have access to so much stuff that if we don't figure out a way to know what we're looking for, it's going to be totally useless to us. And so I think that we'll have lots of access points, but we have to work as hard on the sorting points.
But maybe the intelligence that we have with us will do that.
But somebody better be working on that. I tell you.
It's a good opportunity.
Yeah, and I
Okay,
think it's a
now
great opportunity.
questions, Karen?
I think it's a great opportunity. The reason, this is like Steve Hoover, the head of the CEO of Park. We speak a lot about this subject exactly. About content, how much of it is out there, and how do you actually interface and deal with it.
Great opportunity. Okay, so questions? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Sharice Wilson from Mannheim. So I just wanted to circle back to the comments that were made about innovation and the fact that Xerox focuses on ideas, value creation, things that solve complex business problems, and things that you're really good at. But how do you accelerate that funnel so that you're honing in on the ideas that are profit optimal? I understand there's a lab at Xerox Park on things you aren't necessarily good at, but what about the things you are good at? And then accelerating, so that they're profit optimal, so you're monetizing what you're really good at.
Yeah, so
first of all, prioritization, I guess, right? Yeah.
The lab at Xerox Park doesn't focus on things we're not really good at, actually. The lab at Park actually has freedoms to work on other people's business problems as well as our own. So that's the difference with the Park Lab. One of the things that we do, it's going to sound really simple, but it's not, is we actually work with customers. What do I mean by our lab guys? So our lab, we have 5 labs, 4 and 1 small one in India, 4 pretty large ones. And we have what we call dreaming sessions with customers. Now, what does that mean? We actually invite customers in, or we go to their workplaces. Either one is fine, and it's part of the process for our researchers. This is not my sales guys. This is not my systems guys, my manufacturing guys. These are our researchers. They spend time at P&G and say, we don't ask you questions about, so what's your problems? We look at how you work and how you think and actually how you process information and what do you do in a day. And we build up a set of understanding about where we see how they work and how challenged they are around certain areas of their business, particularly work process areas. And we use that as a guide. The researchers use that as a guide for how they can actually help Xerox Corporation understand where to focus its research energy for the things that we are concerned about: document technology, business processes, etc. That's one. Second is I have very little expectation. This is going to be sacrilege when people hear it, that our researchers will actually find a whole bunch of stuff that will make billion-dollar businesses. I have a hope that will happen, but we don't have a set of screens that say, so how much revenue did your your thing, how much revenue will your thing develop in a year? I actually have a huge amount of respect, I was just talking to Steve about this, for actually dreaming and thinking about things and trying hard things and failing a whole lot. And out of that failing a whole lot, this is my research team. This is not for my engineers. This is not for my technicians. This is for my research guys. We hire them out of the best schools with PhDs so that they can actually think about stuff. And I've heard, before I became CEO, I was really panicked about this. I heard people talk about, yeah, well, we have what they call directed research. We have time gates for invention, for discovery. Time gates for discovery? I'm like, really? How do you do that?
Tell people to be creative?
Yeah. Invent today. So I actually think that there's a large amount of flexibility that we should be able to give our research people. And with that, with a set of disciplines, with knowledge of what the customers want, with really good intimacy about what we do for a living, out comes more things than they can possibly work on as ideas that they should be working on. And then they head down that path. But I don't think that there's like this science where you can do, study. We actually hire ethnographers, social scientists who actually think about how people do things. And I remember when we first started doing this, when I first learned that we were doing this was before I was CEO, I'm like, what the heck do we need these guys for? I mean, we need some physicists and some chemists, et cetera, and the smartest move in the world. Because the problem is not what can you think about how to do a set of nanotechnology things. It's what the hell could you use this stuff for? What could people use it for? And that's where we continue to look at it. We continue to push. I continue to push. Our lab managers continue to push to try to get out there and understand what do people do for a living? How do they do their work? Where do they get stuck? What's possible? What's possible? And I think that's what it is. Yeah, different from engineers, by the way.
Yeah, there's some very confusing examples out there right now. I mean, Apple Computer didn't have a big market research panel that said make the iPod. Mm-hmm. Didn't happen. Yep. And so Apple's they're confusing everyone, and I think we have to keep in mind, he is a 1 in every 100 years.
Yeah.
I really think that. I think he's at Edison level, and it's impossible to replicate.
Yeah.
You cannot, and what they're doing there, I think, is it's a combination of two things. This is one of the stupidest things I'll say tonight, but I'll say it, is that they're using common sense. Mm-hmm. The common senseness in these devices, they're not putting all the crap in that people don't want.
Yeah.
They're taking everything out.
Yeah.
So common sense coupled with high level of leadership. Because Steve is saying yes to everything, or no to everything. Mm-hmm. And so I think that...
But I do believe that the approach is exactly the approach I'm talking about. He didn't say, well, I'm going to invent music. He didn't say, I'm going to invent music storage. He said, let me look at what the hell people are doing with these things that they have. And by the way, I'm nowhere near, I wish I were, and somewhere, nowhere near Steve Jobs. But when you think about what happened, you said, man, oh man, this is the most logical solution to a very obvious problem. Right. I have a 16-year-old who had one of those player things, those CD players.
An old
remember?
One, yeah.
And she would carry around these disc things, and she would have to take them out and put them in. So he didn't say, well, I'm going to try to figure out a way to store them. He said, look at this problem. I don't know if this is the way he came about it, but market research or not. This is a business problem waiting for a solution. Yeah. This is a social problem. These things get scratched. They carry them around. It's ridiculous. They got to take them out and take them in. Why wouldn't you make it accessible, all of the music? And the holders got to be that big.
That's the common sense part. But then he needed the high-level leadership to say no to this, no to this,
I got it.
And yes
to
this.
That's not innovation. That's not the innovation part. That's the leadership part.
Yeah.
Right? So back to this point, so how do you get it done? You walk around and look at the client
that's
and say,
good, that's bad.
You say to yourself, my God, why are these people, isn't this a very clunky way to get access to your music?
Right.
I don't know if this is the way it happened, but boy, oh boy, when you think about the solution, you say, that's obvious. God damn it, isn't that obvious? That's the best type of solution in the world, right?
Other question? Oh, over here. How many minutes? Okay, so next question, sorry.
Yeah, you should get out in the middle of selecting the people. They do that.
Hi, Ursula, thanks for your comments. I'd like to go back to one of the questions you raised early on, that you didn't quite understand why those bright young sparks don't choose innovation and technology and instead end up in investment banking and the like. There are really two reasons, and I was hoping you could shed some light on how to counteract that. One, of course, as you mentioned, is the money. And the second part, though, I think I saw firsthand when I graduated from an East Coast school. And I was drawn into the same question, and I went to Wall Street for 10 years before I finally got enough of that and wound up here. But the main reason for the choice there was because there was insufficient information in the educational programs to tell the students what an innovative career path means. And every year I go back to the East Coast schools to recruit, and every year it's a hard slog explaining the differences. This is not just in engineering, but also in the liberal arts, because unknown to many of them, talent in the liberal arts also play a huge role in Silicon Valley. And other than 2 schools in this country that understand career paths and innovation are very, very potent, how would you recommend that the US government in some way, or the private sector, do this education so that there's a more educated choice as opposed to everyone swarming towards Wall Street and consulting?
Yeah, I actually do agree that
It's very good.
the gap is more than just the money, for sure. I tried to allude to it a little bit about celebrating what engineers and scientists do more than we do today. There's very little celebration. There's very little transparency into what an engineer or a scientist does every day. There's like none. There's a lot of transparency into what bankers do because we celebrate them all the time, or around what basketball players do because we obviously celebrate them, actors. So people actually go after that because they can actually see, even though it's 1 in a million, a career path from, you play here, you go there. So I do agree that there is a requirement that industry, I don't think this is necessarily a government thing, but that industry play a more active role in partnering with the education infrastructure in a way that allows people some kind of transparency into careers. Working is a big way. I tell you, this idea about internships sounds ridiculous, but it is so huge. It's such a big deal to have people who spend, 50 kids, these are, 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, who run around with you or in your company to understand that, yeah, there's real work that's pretty exciting. It's pretty neat that these people are just like you were when they were just like you when they were younger, that there is some reality there. That's one way to do it, internships, partnerships, a lot more celebration of success around innovation and around technology, et cetera, et cetera.
How many times have you been invited to speak at your kids' schools about what you do?
All the time.
That's always been true? All those schools wanted you to come speak? When they were in elementary school, et cetera, they wanted you to come in and talk?
Yeah, my son's school and my daughter's school. My son went to a Jesuit school, and when he was a grade schooler, they didn't care, they didn't ask. All he wanted was the money. But when he went to high school, they were very highly interested in what the parents did.
Maybe everyone in this audience should and could do that.
Yeah, and one of the things is we talk about the schools asking. I say it again. We should volunteer.
Yeah.
Just go and say,
yeah, exactly.
Pick a kid, pick a couple of kids, and pick a teacher and say, I can come in, and we know more about what's failing and what's succeeding today than anybody ever did. And one of the things that we know is failing is this idea that we can't draw people in. We can't draw these kids in. They will try to do something that's unbelievably hard to do before they try to do something that is easy, engineering or science, relatively easy, a higher hit rate, because they don't have an idea what the hell they do. They think it's hard, so on and so forth. So we have to actually get more engaged than we have ever been in the past. The models of, pack your kids up and send them off and then pick them up at the end of the day no longer.
But I think maybe a goal for everyone in the room is to do that once in the coming year. Go into your kids' schools and give a talk.
Yeah, give a talk.
Yeah. The next question, last question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Couple of things. Last year, I think Churchill Group had Larry Ellison, and he made a very interesting comment about cloud computing. I don't know if you guys ever heard that one. So if you can comment a little bit about cloud computing.
Who said that?
Larry Ellison.
I don't know what he said. I have no idea.
He said this last year about cloud computing?
Last year he was at Churchill and he made a comment about cloud computing. Somebody asked him a question, what does he think about cloud computing? And I don't know if you, I think that's the highest Twitter ever, hits to that one question ever.
I ignore him all the time. So what did he say?
Well, he didn't believe in cloud computing. He said we've been doing this for generations and generations, and he said that VCs basically came up with this word.
When I was a kid, I was going to public high school in New Hampshire, and we were on Dartmouth timesharing. Dartmouth, John Kennedy had written Basic Computing, and we had a 300 baud line down to my high school, and I was there writing Basic at age 13 on the computers at Dartmouth. And this is a return to the past, to the dustbin of history. There's no reason to go backwards here. Because these devices are so powerful.
I think it's
So
an interesting. I actually don't agree with him. I mean, you can put a name onto it. Back then, it was called cloud. It should have been called cloud computing. Call it. I mean,
call it that.
We make it up. We make up names for it. This is what it is to me, right? You have an infrastructure. I call it. If we could figure out a way to do cloud copying, we would do it. Let me tell you why. You have an infrastructure, it's called this machine. It's a multifunction device that does this great stuff for you. The average utilization is about 10%. Because you go home, you go to sleep. The damn thing, it sits there all the time.
Yeah.
So this is the way I think about cloud. It's pretty simple. You have an infrastructure that you use 15% of. Why would you, and everybody buys one that they use 15% of. Some smart person, New Hampshire, your school, somebody else, some smart person put a word around this and created an infrastructure where you don't have to buy something and use 15% of. Whether we call it cloud or whatever, I think it's fairly useful. It's a fairly useful, cost-efficient, energy-efficient set of tools that we now have that somebody called cloud. But I think it's useful. I don't think it's the end-all or be-all of anything. It's just a set of services that are now available because somebody has developed an infrastructure that allows you to share. But news, this is one of my specialties. News makes things news. It doesn't make it important, right? It doesn't make it. So cloud computing is required. I just think it's useful.
Cloud computing is half of the answer.
It's half of the answer.
That's what he was trying to say. He was like, this cloud computing is the new terminology which just came out.
Yeah,
but it's been there for generations.
I would agree with him around that then. Yeah. But I mean, the enablers around, other things enabled cloud computing to be impactful. Other things did it, right? So the fact that we do have lots of apps developers that actually, developers that can develop apps that they can actually now place in places that they would never have a chance and a way to place it there. So other things happened that made it useful, more useful. Both are required.
Before I get thrown off is, as a CEO, how do you prioritize? Because you're one of the biggest companies in America. As a CEO, how do you prioritize what is important, what needs your upright attention, what can wait, what not can wait? How do you get to that?
Yeah, I wish I could answer that as easily as you asked the question. I think.
Better talk to her afterwards.
Yeah. There are, one of the things that I learned in my career, I had some of the best teachers in my career, was that it was really important that you understood the difference between urgent and important, right? So one thing that I wake up most days and say, let's make sure that I keep my eye on the important things here and don't get wrapped up in all the urgent things, because they generally aren't that impactful. Right? They solve a very short-term problem. But so that's one thing, is to make sure that you're clear about the difference between urgency and important, and that you then align the efforts that you make that you could consider important, the areas you put your energy around strategy and people. These are two things that I think you can't farm out. Picking people, directing people, letting go of people, tuning people, 130,000 of them. People say you tune 130,000 of them. Not at all. Probably 20 guys. And when I say guys, I mean men and women in our company. Maybe 50 now since we bought ACS. My time is spent on making sure that these 50 people are tuned correctly. And correctly is, one, around me personally. It took me a long time to say this. I want. You should do it this way because I like it. These are words that I was not raised well on using. And if you misuse them, it's really bad, right? But it is about finding people who can work well with you and fill your holes so that together we can do the right thing. So it's one that have the rights. I have a set of attributes. One is you have to be fearless. You can't be a wimp. You have to make a decision. You have to try. The second thing is you have to be fast. So when you mess up, which I assure you you will, you better figure out a way to respond really quickly and change. And this thing about you must decide, and you better be fast on fixing the problems after you create them. And you can't be wrong more times than you're right. Then you're incompetent. Right? So if you're wrong more times than you're right, then we have to fire you and fire somebody who's right more times than they're wrong. So this cycle can actually work out net better at the end of the day, right? And then you have to be, and I'm on to this one, nice. If you are raised by wolves, you will drive away all the sheep. Right? And so, somebody told me early,
we're in the land of Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison.
I'm not going to make a characterization of those two guys except for to say.
They've been very successful.
I mean,
that's not in their vocabulary. That word.
I don't care. In my vocabulary, I mean that really. I think that there is something graceful and long-term about being a human being. And people always say to me, Ursula, I'm so amazed. You're so transparent and open. And I keep saying, am I really? Isn't this the way that most people have conversations with people you run into? It's just like regular, how are you, George? Are you doing okay? Yeah. Let's have a conversation about your kids and how your business is going. I think you're stupid here. I think you're good here. These are regular conversations. We've tuned ourselves to have these very organized, super unhuman conversations with people. People ask you a question and you think, and then you say, here's the programmed answer. People ask me a question, I answer it. And I get in trouble more times than not. So Carl Langsenkamp, my PR guy, is going to beat me up about this. But, I wasn't, so I think that so you got to be fearless. You got to decide. And so I always say you have to attach yourself to an opinion or a decision. This idea that you're going to wait for everybody else to decide and engage the team, I like that 1 out of every 10 times. But 9 out of 10 times, I better know what the hell you're thinking in the room. And by the way, you may not do it your way, and then you have to be right a lot. So you have to be competent. You can't be right all the time, but if you're wrong a lot of the time and have a big mouth, you're useless to me, right? And then this whole idea about if you can tune the people right, if you can get this kind of resonance where you're all kind of in harmony, then you can do, it's amazing what you can do. It's amazing what you can do as a company. You may not be the most innovative or the most whatever the heck it is. You may not have Steve Jobs that leads you. You may not even have the best strategy. I think likely that you may not have it's likely that you probably don't have the greatest strategy. But I almost assure you every year you'll be able to beat the average guy. And then you work on the next thing. So how do you get a good strategy? And this is something that people used to do all by themselves. Right? You say, well, we're going to sit in the room and we're going to get our guys and we're going to develop a strategy. I think this is ridiculous. So most of the time my people are running around trying to slay dragons, right? There's somebody's trying to take their customer, they're out there with their so on and so forth. And then we bring them in once every couple of months and say, let's think about the strategy. Yeah, right, strategy, what's that again? So I think that you have people who spend time, I call it leisurely time. We give these, they have easy, quote unquote, easy jobs. Spend time thinking about the world. You engage people who can help you thinking about the world, about what your strengths are, about how things can change, about where your soft spots are. That this is not the management team doesn't get together and do a strategy. I think they help you think about where the problems are, but then you have to have some people who have time, who have energy and kind of this mental model that will help you lay out options for you. And those are the important. The urgent is I got a call and I have to call John Chambers because John and I are going to go make a call on the government to sell that. We do that all the time. That can take all your time. And it's really good to do. It's cool because you accomplish something. And very rarely do you step back and look at your team and look at what you're doing and make sure that you have those two things tuned well. If you do that, then you can win, I think. So that's to me, everything outside of that is called urgent. Those are the important things.
So thank you, Ursula.
You're welcome.
Had a great time. Wonderful. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you. I'm talking to you.
Ursula and George, on behalf of the Churchill Club and our audience, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. We truly appreciate it. It's been a memorable and inspiring experience for us, and I know it will be for the audience that's viewing the video and listening to this on the radio as well. As a symbol of our thanks, please accept your very own high-fashion Churchill Club T-shirt.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Please wear that in good health. And thanks again to Deloitte for your support. And you have been a terrific audience. Thank you so much for coming. Drive safely and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.